Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Friday, June 12th, 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square Washington's state government reporter. And in today's episode, a follow-up to the not so surprising numbers that we got from the Washington Office of Financial Management about a week ago about how dire the projections are going to be going into 2027. Senator Chris Gildon, who is the Republican budget lead for the Senate, says, yeah, welcome to reality. This is what we've been screaming for a long while. And he's wondering if, in fact, tax hikes will be the solution offered by majority Democrats. Then Pierce County, pay attention. There's a public meeting, and you can attend via Zoom or in person tomorrow morning. This is, yes, a Saturday morning meeting of the Charter Review Commission to take sort of public feedback on the growing list of potential amendments that could end up being sent to voters this fall, including a handful to change the office of the elected sheriff in Pierce County, making it an appointed, not elected position, among other proposals they are considering. I spoke to one of the Charter Review Commission members today, going to share some of her concerns with you, as well as some concerns raised by Pierce County Sheriff Keith Swank. And then the latest review of what's happening up on North Aurora. We've been talking about this for the last couple of weeks in North Seattle, where residents, business owners have been, well, in one case, a little over a week ago, they took over the streets of downtown Seattle in a protest, demanding that the city come in and do something about the rampant crime, about the prostitution, about the pimp turf war that's been taking place. And now with the World Cup basically right on top of us here in Seattle, there is some growing community concern and some response from the office of Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson. We'll share that with you in today's episode of Washington in Focus. So, a week after Washington Office of Financial Management Director Katie Chapman delivered a pretty sobering outlook, warning of significant impending shortfalls across both the operating and transportation budgets, a Senate Republican budget lead is telling the Center Square, this is what we've been screaming from the rooftops about for the last year. This is Senator Chris Gildon, Republican, representing Puyallup. He tells me that majority Democrats, in his opinion, are basically out of control on their spending, and that's really the bulk of the reason why we've ended up here.
We have been screaming this from the rooftops all year long, Carlene. We said, and the quote that I used every single time was, the budget they proposed was a house of cards built on a shaky foundation. It was structurally unsound. And the reason that I said that is, number one, it spent $5 billion more than we were expecting to even receive. They used a lot of one-time dollars to pay for ongoing items, just like they've been doing in years past. And, $5 billion more they spent than they were even expecting to receive. And that was the budget that passed. And to make matters worse, in, I believe it's fiscal year 2027, the budget as it passed was already $878 million in the hole. So the budget that passed was in a deficit.
Now, that release from the Office of Financial Management 1 week ago, back on June the 5th, characterized the current landscape as perhaps the most challenging fiscal environment state leaders have ever navigated. And as reported by my colleague and our state editor here in Washington for the Center Square, Andrew Paxton, over the past decade, yes, inflation has grown across the state. It's climbed by 39%. And then state population between 2015 and 2025 also went up. We added more than 1 million new residents, with increasing demand then for public services. According to that memo from OFM, they think that is a reason for the big drain on the state budget. But Senator Gildon pushes back on that narrative, basically calling bunk on, attributing those factors as the reason why we've gotten ourselves into budget trouble.
So one of the things that the OFM director said was, look, our budget's in trouble because inflation is up high and we've had a lot of people move into our state over the last few years. Okay, fine. However, what she's not saying is that the state budget has grown by, I think it's 3 times inflation and 9 times population growth. The state budget is out of control. It's more than doubled over the last decade. And don't take my word for it. If you don't want, take Governor Christine Gregoire's word for it, just in a recent forum when she said that state spending is out of control. She said, I think her words were, Washington State doesn't have a revenue problem, it has a spending problem. And all of these record-breaking taxes that they passed over the last couple of years. So 2 years ago, they passed a record-breaking tax. Then they were facing a budget shortfall because they spent everything. Now this last year, they were facing a budget shortfall and they passed a record-breaking tax. Now it looks like we're facing another budget shortfall. But it doesn't matter how many taxes they pass, Carlene, because taxes are not the problem. Spending is the problem.
Now, OFM's directive specifically warned state agency heads not to count on the recently passed income tax. Of course, we have legal challenges moving forward. And we right now have Let's Go Washington out there gathering signatures on petitions to hopefully get a repeal on the November ballot. So OFM is saying, even though the current state budget picture was counting on the income tax, she's warning against crafting the budget going into 2027's legislative session at all, relying on any, thinking that the income tax is going to be there. She says basically, don't count on it. So much more on that, I'm sure, in the weeks and months to come. Governor Bob Ferguson did come out after OFM's sort of stark warning about the dire situation for the budget. And he said, I won't support any tax increases for the 2027 legislative session. So we're going to see if, in fact, that proves to be the case, if he holds to that in the months to come. And now, Pierce County, if any of y'all are watching from Pierce County, you might want to pay attention. There is a public meeting on Saturday morning, and you can attend in person or via Zoom. Yes, it's a charter amendment review meeting on a Saturday morning. It doesn't happen very often. It is highly unusual. They're doing this because the Charter Review Commission is basically trying to push through, at this point, consideration of 20 different proposals. Now, any of these that they end up adopting will go to voters. Ultimately, voters in Pierce County will have the final say if they want to, make an amendment to the charter for the county. So the consideration here of most concern and what we're talking about today are 4 of the specific proposals here that have to do with changing how the office of Pierce County Sheriff basically works, making it an appointed rather than elected position. And another one that also would create an office of the ombudsman to oversee the elected sheriff for Pierce County. Now, we included this topic earlier in the week. I had a conversation with Pierce County Sheriff Keith Swank, speaking out about encouraging people, show up at these meetings, tell them, whether you like me or not, you should want this to be an elected, not appointed position. And there were a lot of people that spoke out at that meeting after he encouraged them a little over a week ago. And his take is that the commission is basically trying to do what Senate Bill 5974 hoped to do. Now, this was the bill that was passed this last session and is basically on hold at this point, thanks to a Thurston County Superior Court judge who found some potentially, constitutional issues with the bill. So there's a stay on that right now, pending further review by the courts, which will take some time. But in the meantime, you've got Pierce County moving forward, basically trying to do the same thing, a runaround of 5974 as far as Sheriff Keith Swank sees it. And he is telling me that even those who don't support him and didn't vote for him are not in support of changing it to be an appointed, not elected position.
On April 30th, I had this event. It was called Save Our Sheriffs, and people bought tickets to come out to it. It was very large. It was 200 people or more showed up at this event I put on, and you had to pay at least $100 for a ticket. It's because it wasn't just going to be people just to show up for freebie, right? If it had been free, I would have had 1,000 people there. But anyhow, my point is this: people who have not been involved in politics before showed up at this meeting to hear about and say, "I'm standing for the right to vote for my sheriff." There are even people that I've talked to who don't even like me, right? They don't want me to be the sheriff, which is fine, but they want to vote for their sheriff. They don't want somebody else telling them who the sheriff's going to be. And I haven't said this to them yet, but I'm going to say this. I'm waiting for the right time to say it. But I'm going to let them know that. Well, what would happen if if I was the executive? What if I ran for executive, got elected? Would you want me picking your sheriff? I think I might have said it to him before. Or ultimately, what if I got elected executive and I just appointed myself sheriff? Then, I mean, that doesn't stop the executive from appointing themselves as sheriff, right? Then they're really a king. Doesn't say in there you can't do that. So. There's some serious issues there with it, and I hope that people will see through it.
So today I spoke by phone with two members of the Pierce County Charter Commission who tell me the way the more progressive leaning members of the commission are going about this process of potentially putting up to 20 different proposals before voters this November is highly unusual, including one, as I mentioned, that would make the sheriff's position an appointed, not elected position, and another to create an ombudsman that could have a lot of say in how things work with the office of the sheriff. I also learned today, I should tell you, from speaking to one of those commission members, that if they do create the office of the ombudsman, those closed door meetings, if you will, their concerns about any issues with the sheriff, complaints they're investigating with the sheriff, those would not be subject to public disclosure. So a member of the media like myself could not then ask and receive documentation from the office of the ombudsman as to how these meetings went down. What complaints did you receive? How did you proceed going forward in, interviewing the sheriff, and what was that procedure? Who else did you talk to? We would not have access to those records. I thought that was a very interesting development I hadn't heard of until today. One of the commission members that I spoke with is Holly Rogie. I spoke to her just about a half an hour ago, and she told me she's very concerned about how all of this has transpired with all of these proposals to change the sheriff's office and to give the county executive a lot more power. So here's part of what she told me. We'll put that up for you. She said, I feel like this is an attempt to implement 5974. So very similar to what Sheriff Swank was saying at a local level. And it's inappropriate and should not be sent to the voters. This is not just about the sheriff. This is really about an elected sheriff who is responsible for enforcing the law. We really want him to be independent and not have a political agenda, which by making that position appointed, it becomes politicized by whoever the executive is at that moment. So again, the meeting scheduled at this point for 9 a.m. on Saturday morning, according to this post on the commission website. It says it is solely for the purpose of receiving public comment on proposals being considered for placement on the November ballot. Public comment will also continue at all remaining commission meetings. The question now, though, is did the county give appropriate and timely notice for a public meeting that's scheduled right now to take place on Saturday morning? There are rules about how much time they have to provide the public for notice and how those notices need to be published, whether they have to be placed outside the county city building, not just inside where that meeting would take place. So whether or not they have violated, once again, the meeting rules remains in question. That's what happened this past Wednesday when there was a meeting scheduled. And I'm told about 70 members of the public showed up there anticipating this meeting. And at the time the meeting was to commence, the commission members notified the public, I'm sorry, this is canceled. We failed to provide enough public meeting as required by law. So Hopefully, they've done so for tomorrow's meeting. I would suggest checking out the Pierce County Commission website before you make the trek down there. Now, it seems that in the city of Seattle, some elected officials are giving in to community pressure to take immediate action on the situation in North Seattle, particularly along a stretch of Aurora Avenue. And Mayor Katie Wilson has announced she'll be shutting down some streets between 96th and 102nd, basically to limit the shootouts and escape the routes for fleeing vehicles. There's been a pimp turf war going on there in recent weeks. A lot of crime that businesses and residents have been speaking out about. And City Attorney Erica Evans spoke at a meeting this week. And I want to share part of this X post that was put up from Discovery Institute's Jonathan Cho.
It's important to implement our ordinances, but as I mentioned, and I'm willing to work with the city attorney, the mayor, and everyone. If we need to make adjustments, we can do that. We can update these ordinances, or we can create new ordinances. And I'm willing to work with our colleagues across the executive and judicial branches to bring these new ordinances or to fix or update whatever the case may be.
Ms. Evans, you heard Councilmember Bob Kettle offer an olive branch in some ways. What concessions or changes would you need to start enforcing and prosecuting the soap and soda ordinance that's already on the books?
Thank you for that question, Jonathan. I'll start by saying soap and soda have been orders that have been in place for over 30 years. And if they were effective, Aurora and other areas of Seattle, including Little Saigon, would be safe, and they're not. What we are focused on are policies that are outcome-driven in data that are going to be effective. Soap orders don't work. FERPA orders work. Getting guns out of the hands of folks that are committing violence in our neighborhood is an effective way to stop the gun violence. That is what our office is being led by. Two experienced prosecutors, myself and Jenna Robert, who's also here, my criminal division chief. We have a combined over 20 years of experience as prosecutors. And those are the policies and procedures we are leading in. Things that work, that are measurable, and not just things that sound good. Thank you for the question.
Now, my colleague Randy Diamond, who covers Seattle for the Center Square Washington, is putting up a story today about all of this with the latest comments from Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson. She was at a city hall on Thursday night and basically said her administration won't tolerate violence on that residential street and surrounding Aurora Avenue businesses and residents. And she's promising a coordinating response, she says, to rout out the crime and the underlying prostitution that is driving it.
We are unified in our commitment and resolve to address the serious violence that North Aurora is facing. For weeks, neighbors living near Aurora have been sending a clear message. People are tired of hearing gunfire in the middle of the night. They are tired of bullets striking their homes. They are tired of seeing violence associated with exploitation spill onto the streets where they are trying to raise children and live their lives. And they are tired of feeling like they have to solve this problem by themselves. When neighbors start building their own makeshift barriers, that is a sign that people do not feel that the system is working for them. That's not where we want to be. People should be able to trust that their city is taking action to keep their neighborhood safe.
Now, keep in mind, we are just a few days away from the first World Cup match in Seattle. There have been a lot of concerns raised by members of the public about this, with Seattle police resources needing to be redirected down to the stadium districts where the matches will be played. Will that leave these stretches of Aurora Avenue more vulnerable to crime? That remains to be seen. There are neighboring agencies, including the King County Sheriff's Department and others, and of course State Patrol, that are going to be helping out Seattle police during the World Cup. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the coming weeks as all of this plays out. So thank you for watching today's Friday episode of Washington in Focus Daily. Going to be sunny and hot this weekend. I hope you get a chance to get outside and enjoy it. We'll see you again on Monday.